Hi, this is Kelly Sadler, and this is Politically Unstable. Today, I'm joined by Brett Tolman, a former U.S. attorney and the founder of the Tolman Group. Brett, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Thanks for having me, Kelly.
So this week we had the Hunter Biden trial wrap up, and he was found guilty on all three accounts. He was convicted. Were you surprised by the outcome of that trial and the guilty verdict?
No, I really was not surprised. It's as close to a strict liability crime as we have on the books, actually. You just check a box. And if you can show that they were using drugs at the time, and if they did attempt to purchase or possess the firearm, I prosecuted dozens of these cases and over about a 10-year period of time. What I am interested to see happen, though, Kelly, is in the federal system, if you go to trial, you lose the ability to lower your sentence through acceptance of responsibility. Now, that's how it typically works.
Mm-hmm.
So I was surprised to see them go to trial and risk that he might actually have a longer prison sentence.
Why did they go to trial? There's been a lot of, back and forth on this issue. A lot of people call this lawfare, and if it was anyone other than Hunter Biden, this never would have gone to trial in the first place. It's essentially a paperwork crime that is not tried very often.
I was actually quite stunned. It's one thing to go to trial on a case where you have law that's not settled, or you have facts that don't seem to be sufficient, like in the Trump case, versus this one. 95% guilty verdicts in federal juries across the country. I would have advised him to plead guilty to it. Worked out a deal where he didn't have to probably serve jail time. I don't know that he will or not. I don't know what his criminal history is, and that's a big part of this sentence. But I was surprised, very surprised that they would roll the dice and go to trial.
Well, isn't this, he was granted a sweetheart deal that a judge blew up. And that's the reason why now he has two separate charges. One is kind of the gun charges. And he also has in California a tax case. But, do you think it was, he just thought that with the Biden name being tried in Delaware, where, they're the first family, that somehow he would get off with a non-guilty verdict, or a court that was sympathetic to him and just basically give him a slap on the hand for being an addict?
Yeah, I think there is some element to that. Certainly they may have, predicted a Delaware jury was going to be, more. And you can hear some of the comments of the jurors have indicated that they thought that he was sad and that he needed help and true rehab. And so there was some sympathy there. It's just very hard to beat a case like that. I think, though, Kelly, I would say that there's more arrogance at play here than anything else. If I was advising him, I would have resolved the case, pled guilty to one count, pled guilty to the one count in the tax case, quietly worked out a sentence that was legitimate and within the guideline range, and then I would have put all of my pressure on my father to pardon me. That seems to have been the play, and maybe that's still in the cards for him.
Well, Joe Biden has said multiple times this week that he is not going to pardon his son. Do you think that that's legitimate, or after the election, the day after the election, he will look to pardon Hunter Biden?
Yeah, I don't believe it. I don't think his track record is that of being notoriously honest. And so I think let's see what happens. But I think there's going to be tremendous amount of pressure. I would not be surprised, however, let's say Trump wins. I wouldn't be surprised if Trump issued a commutation of a sentence, and tried to take that and run with that, or we should get back to some semblance of use of the clemency in this country, more routine. It's just ironic that now we're talking about the possibility of it being the president's son.
Now, in terms of the sentencing, Hunter hasn't faced any sentencing yet. Do you think that there's any possibility he'd be serving jail time before the November election, or what's the timeline on that, and what do you think the judge will order him?
If they go according to regular order, that happens in 99% of the cases, criminal cases, where you're found guilty by a jury and then awaiting sentence, he will be sentenced within 30 to 60 days. And that his sentence would actually, the average sentence on a crime like this is, I think it's roughly below 3 years in federal prison, the guideline range. So it depends. If he has no criminal history, then the judge may have a little bit wider latitude to fashion home confinement or something of that nature. But if this judge follows what is happening across the country, then he will get a prison sentence, and it would be served within 30 to 60 days.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the other convicted felon, that is President Donald Trump. We know early this week, his team went to the judge and wanted the gag order that he has on him lifted, especially since he's going to be going into a debate in the next 2 weeks and wants to obviously talk about this case on the debate stage. Why is the gag order still in existence? And why is the judge fighting back on this one? I mean, the case has been tried and the jury, convicted him. So why do we need a gag order still?
Yeah, I actually find it to be quite outrageous, Kelly. I think you're right to highlight. I think right now it's a control issue. It is, a judge that wanted to justify implementing it in the first place. And, so there's a technicality. He's not a convicted felon yet. That comes after sentencing, when the judge actually enters the judgment and conviction. Then at that moment, he's technically a convicted felon. So maybe the judge is believing that he's justified all the way through sentencing.
It just doesn't make any sense to me because, I mean, it was implemented on the basis that Trump couldn't go after anybody on the jury and talk about them and, put their lives or whatever in jeopardy. But it applies to Michael Cohen, who's still going out pretty much every single day on his podcast, and Stormy Daniels, too, that's also doing interviews. And it just seems very unfair that the president can't counter these people who are basically, slandering him in his name every single day.
Well, I believe it's wholly unconstitutional. I've never seen, so the gag order is a tool to be used. I've seen it used, had it used in some cases of mine, and it's always been used to actually protect the defendant. Outside of, direct threats to harm, kill, injure, assault somebody like that, it would never be applied to a defendant. It would only be applied to witnesses, to jurors, to the prosecution or the defense team. And it would also be universal. It would apply to multiple individuals on both sides and the jury as well. And so it's mind-boggling what's happening here, and you would only do that if you truly are wanting to work with the prosecution to shut down the leading candidate of the Republican Party.
Well, I mean, a lot of us were appalled watching Donald Trump's trial and the actions that this judge took. Now, the left is saying that everything was by the book. This was a solid case. The judge had no conflicts of interest. Joe Biden had nothing to do with this. This wasn't a political persecution. After watching that trial and how it played out, I mean, do you agree with these talking points? Because on my end, watching it, it seems like the judge did everything that he could to put to basically weigh in and help Alvin Bragg in the prosecution's case.
Yeah, I mean, it harkens back to Scalia that would say that there's nothing that makes something seem more legitimate than an indictment being returned, a prosecution pursuing it, a judge ruling, and then a jury reaching a verdict, and all that can be done and place an imprint of legitimacy when something was wholly illegitimate to begin with. And here, let's go to some of the facts. If we think it's gone by law and order and it was just and we should support the verdict. Well, this is a case in which you reference the gag order. That's an issue. You also have the judge refusing to rule on 403 evidence, and what that is evidence that is unfairly prejudicial, irrelevant, or confusing in the case. We got so many instances of 403 evidence, and in a typical case, Kelly, the judge would issue a 403 ruling multiple times during the case. But he didn't do that. He didn't make those rulings. And then I was shocked to see how he would shut down the defense. And that is 180 degrees opposite of what we typically see, which is a judge bending over backwards to actually allow evidence in, allow the defense to present their case, because they don't want to risk overturning on an appeal. Here, they didn't care about that. They did not care about it. They hid from the defense one key item, and that was, what is the underlying predicate crime? And they didn't reveal that until the very end, in which it then became a smorgasbord of three options that could be chosen by the jury. That's violates the Fifth and Sixth Amendment, and so we'll see. I mean, will it get reversed? I believe it will, but the damage is done in their mind, and that's what they were intending, was to hobble him going into the election.
Well, we know that he hasn't been sentenced yet. Given Judge Merchan's bias throughout this entire process, do you think there's a possibility of jail time for the former president?
I do. I think it's real. I've heard rumor coming out of Manhattan that they're going to ask for a year of jail time. I think in normal circumstances with a normal judge and case, I think there's not a snowball's chance this would result in jail time. But this, if you wanted to select the most likely judge to give this defendant jail time, it would be Judge Merchan.
That is unbelievable. I know that there's a movement, and there's many congressional members that want Kathy Hochul to pardon the president. Do you think that there's any likelihood of that?
I don't think there's a likelihood, but it would be a truly momentous, and I think revolutionary decision that would harken back to some of the efforts of Lincoln and others to try to heal the divide in the country. But do I think Joe Biden's capable of that? No, I don't.
No, that's unfortunate. Well, thank you, Brett, so much for your time today.
Thank you, Kelly.
Insights as a former U.S. attorney, and we'll be following these cases closely in the weeks ahead.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you too.